All right. Thank you for joining us today, and I'll call the October 27th, 2022 meeting of the Police Advisory and Oversight Board into order. So let's begin with an introduction of commission members.
Todd Spellery.
Tanya Graywind.
Dave Hoganson.
Joanna Johnson.
Lucretia King.
Conrad Thomas.
Scott Paul.
All right. Before getting started today, I just wanted to take a moment and clarify our board's role and review our governing ordinance. We're in our 7th meeting, and it seems like a good time to review the purpose and specific duties of our board. I hope this review helps each of us on the board to reflect over our meetings so far and moving forward. And I hope it's informative to those present or watching. I am going to review the ordinance, and if you use your Google or search engine of your choice to look up the City of Fargo Ordinance 5327, or you could just input Fargo Police Advisory Board Ordinance, and it should bring you to the Ordinance and Municipal Code. I'm not going to read the entire ordinance, but I did just want to review sections 2, 3, and 9. That's the purpose, the duties, and the review of post-discipline. The other areas were more administrative, so decided not to review those. So section 2, the purpose of the Fargo Police Advisory and Oversight Board is to advise and assist the City of Fargo and the Fargo Police Department in policy development specific to police community relations, education, outreach, and other areas of concern to the community. And the board will be tasked with providing a review and input into the following areas of community concern. Now, there are 7 areas listed that include, but aren't limited to, data evaluation, use of technology in policing, review of completed personnel investigations, police response to mental health, and community and department trainings that would benefit police community relations. It also goes on to state that the board will work to create a dialogue between community representatives and the department, and the board will work to improve relations between law enforcement and the community, assist with recruitment of diverse candidates, and provide community perspective on policy, programs, and priorities in the department. Section 3 is in regard to the specific duties of the Fargo Police Advisory and Oversight Board. And as a board, we're invited to assist the department with community outreach opportunities, as well as suggest community events that through department participation would benefit community relationships. We also are to advise the department on community concerns and provide input and work collaboratively with the department to address them. We will be able to review quarterly or annual reports from the department regarding policies of concern to the community and review existing department policies, procedures, and practices relating to community concerns and provide feedback. Also, we would be tasked with reviewing post-discipline findings of formal professional standards division investigations of misconduct by department members. And then section 9 does go into the review of the post-discipline administrative and citizen concerns. And it states that the board may review cases of misconduct by department personnel investigated by the Professional Standards Division. Only cases which are post-discipline may be reviewed, and review shall not be heard until all pending cases or any applicable appeals, grievances, or other review of the incident have been concluded. It does go on to state that all police reports, videos, and interviews or other investigative files submitted to the board for review shall have the personal identifiers of all involved citizens, witnesses, and officers redacted in accordance with the North Dakota Open Records provisions. And the board's review will be for the purpose of reviewing and advising the chief of police on suggested practices and training relevant to issues or concern uncovered during the investigation. So just to clarify, we're not an investigative board. We don't have access to information during investigations, and we ourselves are not investigators or a subset of the Fargo Police Department. We're a volunteer board made up of community members tasked to review, assist, and advise in the areas as described, and bring areas of concern in the community to the department and work in collaboration to address these issues. So I hope this was a good review for our panel of members and informative to those present or watching. But I would like to move forward with our agenda. We do have a lot to cover today. Next item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I motion to approve the agenda.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carried. Approving the minutes is up next on the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I motion to approve the minutes.
All right, can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Those who wish to address the Police Advisory and Oversight Board must use the sign-in sheet. Speakers must state their name and will be limited to 2 minutes. And comments should not contain profanity or personal attacks, please. Do we have anyone signed up for comments today?
Yes, Reverend Karen signed up.
There was no sign-in sheet where it's at. Okay, we didn't know that. This is the first time students sign up. Nobody told us it was public comment today.
Like I said, I came in at 5:01 and did not sign up either. That's
So can we sign up for it?
on the website, so.
Okay.
Yeah, let him sign it.
Okay.
For the record, moving forward, we do our best at this time at the start of the meeting. The public comment sign up will be taken and further requests will be asked to wait to the following month.
Thank you for the clarification.
Sure. And also for clarification, we do have public comment in every single meeting up to this point and moving forward.
Thank you. All right, come up and please state your name.
Hello, my name is Reverend Karen Van Fossen. I live here in Fargo, not too far from this spot. I'm an ordained minister serving the larger community. Thank you for hearing from the public today and apparently at every meeting. I am here as a community member connected to many people in the community who remain grieved and concerned and in mourning about the death, the killing of Shane Netterville. It's my understanding, I did attend the Human Rights Commission meeting last week. It's my understanding that that commission is now asking this body to take up an independent investigation. I did hear you say that you are not investigators yourselves, nor are you a subset of the police, but that you are a separate entity, and certainly it's within your purview, and I would say at this point moral responsibility to call for and do the work required to make an independent investigation into Shane's death happen. And I look forward to being a part of that conversation, and many, many people in the community do as well. his death continues to have reverberations that are profound for us, for many people. And there are many questions that remain unanswered and hearts that remain broken. And we believe that an independent investigation would create a circumstance in which some true learning could happen and also some genuine healing to understand what has taken place here and what changes, because certainly there are changes that need to be made, can happen as soon as humanly possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the list is Faith Dixon.
Hi, my name is Faith Dixon. I would like to agree with what Reverend Karen said about allowing an external investigation. I heard what you said, Dr. Joanne Johnson, that you all are not investigators, but we do, as a public, expect this board to be able to hear our comments and hear our complaints of what is happening to us on the outside of these walls. So I do understand that you're not investigators, that you are community members yourself, but what is happening on the outside needs to be addressed on the inside as well. So I hope that this board could add their opinions to what should be done and not just allow our police department to investigate themselves. I also wrote an email to Chief and Sergeant Christie about public comment because we were not aware of public comment. The last two meetings that we were here, there was no sign-up sheet, so I did email that to them on October 25th and had never received a response, as well as how can we have things as the public to be added on the agenda. These are things that we saw what happened with the HRC meeting, and when Wes was told that he could not add anything on the agenda by Dr. Terry, it really did allow the work that was done to be thrown out. So those are some of the questions that I have. How can we add things as the public on the agenda? Now that today we are aware of public comment, that'll be nice to know that at 4:50, 4:55, come on in and sign up for public comment, as well as you all being able to be aware of customers or citizens' complaints of Fargo PD. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wes, you're next, please. Mr. Falome.
Wes Philome, he, him, his pronouns. I'd like to start by saying long live George Floyd and Onue Magic. When me and Faith imagined what an oversight board would look like in this community, when we work with the chief, the mayor, and the DEI, putting you guys together to create this, our vision, as far as me and Faith, was not to have a board that was a weapon of the police. It was to be one that was a board that would hold them accountable and be a voice for the people. That's who you guys are, as you're stating definitions today. Dr. Joanna Johnson, I think you're a great human being. I think it's difficult for me as a person of color, to accept that, as the chairperson, when this meeting occurred where Dr. Terry was the only person of color in the room, as the chair of the Oversight Committee, to accept that you would be the one advocating on the behalf of our marginalized community. I wonder what you know about being harassed by police, racially profiled, having family members killed by police. You have to be able to identify with these things in order to truly advocate for us as a people. the board has to stand up. The HRC said this would be coming back to you guys to make a decision as far as an independent investigation, and now it's not even on the agenda. So I'm just really having trouble with how things are working out here. The community can't even contact you guys without emailing the police department first, which is a clear conflict of interest. You guys need to be independent and not controlled by Fargo PD. You are supposed to be a voice of the people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Mr. Cohen, please.
Hi, Christopher Cohn, Fargo resident, pronouns he, him, his. And I wanted to request that someone on the board make a motion to extend these public comments to 3 minutes, or at least 2.5 that we get at the Fargo City Commission, because 2 is just too short. And also if someone could make a motion to request that the FPD put contact information on the webpage for this board. Last time I looked at it, there wasn't any. With regard to the officer-involved shooting of Shane Letterling on July 8th, I wanted to make a couple things that I saw for what it's worth, and at the last meeting. So when the police did their analysis, I think they showed us within 3/100ths of a second that the wheels turned, there was a screech noise, and then the final 1/3 of a second, the officer shot through the windshield. And because his life was threatened, because the car was turned toward him and moving, and yet he stepped out of the way. So there was time to step out of the way and not be hit. So that should be considered. And also, when they arrived on the scene, supposedly they thought they were arriving on a scene with 3 dead bodies in a car and a bullet hole in the window. And yet the officer arrives with his gun extended like this, ordering them to get out of the car. You don't order bodies to get out of the car. So I don't believe that they thought these were 3 dead bodies in the car. I think that was not true. And also we need to be able to contact this board for a variety of things, whether it's to give you something for our public comment, some visuals, or to place an item on the agenda or other things. And right now they're giving us only one contact for the agenda, and that's it.
Thank you.
That's it, Madam Chair.
All right, the next item is Police Department updates. Let's begin with Chief Sobolski.
I'm going to keep it brief, but just to let everyone know that we have an agendized item here relative to kind of a brown bag meeting to review the first 6 months of the board. And I have already discussed with the city attorney, one of those discussion points being agenda items and public comment questions that were raised here today. So that will be posted as a meeting, and that will be addressed, and we'll come up with some solutions for that. So just so you're aware of that.
All right. Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to show my appreciation for the individuals that were able to make it out to the additional training that was provided to you as board members, and the 3 individuals that, due to scheduling complexities, were unable to make it. In the future, if we can attempt to reschedule that, if you're still interested, you have the ability to contact me, and we can try to work through that as well. But that was just really just an example of the types of training that we will be opening up to you throughout your tenure on the board in a variety of different capacities, so that when conversations, presentations, and questions are brought forth to you, or when you're giving a presentation and how to process the information given to you, you have a little bit more understanding. And so we just wanted to show our appreciation for your time and coming out in reference to that, and to know that many more invites like that will come out throughout the years. And we also regularly encourage you and know that you are welcome to do continued ride-alongs as you did in your initial training. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is a presentation of internal use of force review regarding the officer-involved shooting of Mr. Netterville. And there'll be a chance for any follow-up questions from the board members.
So unfortunately, we didn't release this when we did the body camera review, so I will do my best to explain it in the document. I believe the chief provided access to this document for everyone on the board for the internal review, is that correct?
I haven't seen any.
I haven't.
Did not? Okay. So I apologize, I will be reading a lot of this to go over it, but certainly I will, if you have questions during the middle or at the end, I will certainly answer them to the best of my ability. On July 8th at 8:07, Officer O'Brien and other officers were dispatched to an unknown problem and a man down within a garage. One of the 911 calls states that they believe that people are deceased in there and there is a bullet hole within the windshield. Officer O'Brien, as he arrives, sees the bullet hole, and at that point, that is dispatched as well. He then begins making contact with the occupants of the vehicle, telling them that he wants to see their hands. Eventually, other officers arrive, or a short time later, Officer O'Brien then moves to the other side of the garage. As he moves to the other side, that's when the vehicle is initially started up. It was not running at the initially. He moves to the other side, and at that time they continue giving commands. The driver, Mr. Netterville, puts his hands up, puts his right hand down, shuts the car off, turns the car back on, raises his hand, and then eventually starts coming towards Officer O'Brien. Now, there are several things that we see in the camera that the officer reports in the statement that he made. He does go into the garage after the vehicle turns off. He is again giving commands. The vehicle turns back on and is then pointed towards him. At that point, so the tires are still pointed towards him, he starts to back up. So he attempts to move backwards away from the vehicle. However, I don't believe that there are any one of us in here that can walk backwards faster than a vehicle that's approaching us can drive. The vehicle is noted to have accelerated by the by the BCI investigation. He jumps back and tries to create that distance between him, and in the time that he perceives the threat, can't get out of the way of the threat, and then makes the conscious decision to fire his weapon, and then actually fires his weapon. Obviously, the vehicle does not stop moving during his reaction time, so that vehicle continues to move towards him. The round is fired through the windshield, so the front of the vehicle is still pointed in his direction. Officer O'Brien admits to or states to the BCI investigators he was obviously scared. He didn't know what the intention of the driver was for their actions. Officer O'Brien then runs down with other officers. They get him out of the car. Officer O'Brien is attempting to get gloves on, which obviously is very stressful for him as he's trying, because he was just involved in a very traumatic incident. Another officer places his hand over the wound as it's a chest wound. A short time later, the paramedics arrive. The other officer asks, "What do you need me to do?" The paramedic says, "Keep doing exactly what you're doing," or something to that aspect. In the follow-up investigation of the BCI, they did investigate other witnesses. 2 witnesses stated that they did see the vehicle backed in, that they observed the bullet hole in the windshield, that they observed the people that appeared to be slumped over or deceased within the vehicle. Another witness saw after the shooting, well, 2 of them saw after the shooting as well. Both of them state that they believed the vehicle was going to run over the officer and that the officer did not have any choice other than to fire his gun at that time. One of those witnesses further stated it appeared as though Officer O'Brien did not intend or did not want to do what he had to do, as he recalls seeing Officer O'Brien put his hand or his head in his hands after that, as though this witness interpreted it as though he was obviously not happy or excited about what had just happened. Based on the review, the body camera footage, Officer O'Brien did provide a statement to the Bureau of Criminal Investigation in the criminal investigation. On all of those factors, based on that, I believe passed it up the chain of command that the use of force, of deadly force, was reasonable and necessary and within the confines of the law. Any questions?
I have questions, yes. So, would you say that the encounter with Mr. Netterville was it viewed as an immediate threat?
I would believe that it is, just in the fact that we have a bullet hole inside a windshield. We can't see, obviously we can't tell if that bullet is coming from within or from outside. And because of that, and we have people that are in the vehicle, that is an emergency situation. That would force an officer to have to take action right away.
So if Mr. Netterville wanted to harm the officer, he could have harmed that officer when the officer walked in front of the vehicle to Officer O'Brien when he moved over to the other side, correct?
I can't speak for Mr. Netterville.
If I could, I have, actually have a little bit here. I have some comments, some questions, and some specific asks. And these are all around the death of Shane Netterville. And so I wrote this down because I wanted to say it the way I mean it. But in my time serving on this board, I've learned a lot about law enforcement, and I've gained a higher respect for just how difficult good policing is. I've thought too about how myself and this board can support you and all of our law enforcement professionals. And then I got to thinking, how do we define support? And support isn't simply back the blue. That's not how I view support. But it is a number of things. I think it's seeking to understand, it's asking questions, it's careful, mindful listening. I think it's sharing with the community the success stories and the many good things that our officers do every day. It's giving respect for the complex, difficult, and sometimes dangerous work our police officers are expected to do. So what I have next is coming from my heart, from a place of respect. Support also means providing honest feedback, offering ideas, and having conversations, even when those conversations are very difficult. And so working toward that goal, I have some specific comments and questions regarding Shane's death. And so, as we heard earlier from Joanna, we're not an investigative board. We are tasked with two various things that I want to cover tonight, one of which is providing review and input of completed investigations, and the other is advising you, the department, about community concerns. And there are a lot of concerns within the community. And so, my first question, and Chief, this is maybe for you or anyone else, but on August 29th, the Fargo Police Department and the North Dakota Attorney General's Office held a joint news conference where it was announced, and this is a quote, I wrote it down because I wanted to get it right. The use of force was reasonable, justified under the circumstances in this case, and prevented the death or great bodily harm to Fargo Police Department Officer O'Brien and fellow officers. And so listening to that and reading this, could you explain to the board and help us understand, what did shooting Shane Netterville, what did that accomplish?
Thanks for the question, sir. So the legal standard for deadly force is an objectively reasonable standard. And if an officer feels that the actions of another are likely to cause death or great bodily harm to him or another, they are then authorized by law to use deadly force. In this scenario, and I guess I would remind everyone that we provided the video, I think 2 months ago at our 2 meetings ago, and went over that entire scenario so that people could see kind of in real time and in slow motion what happened in seconds and the decision process that had to occur during those few seconds. The officers were conducting their lawful duty and obligation, investigating a complaint from a community member about some very suspicious activity, which potentially people were injured or dead, and in which a firearm was involved, as noted by the notation in the dispatch call, that there was a bullet hole in the windshield. This obviously caused the officers to use additional caution as they approach because they have no idea what they're walking into. Even the caller's information isn't always accurate, so they have to proceed with caution. Officer O'Brien, as he approaches the garage, notices that there is what appears to be a bullet hole in the windshield, which is why he draws his weapon, lets the other officers know. And at this juncture, they have, again, a duty and a lawful obligation to investigate to find out what's going on. Is there someone injured in the car? Did the bullet go in or did it go out? What specifically is happening in this abandoned garage with the stolen vehicle and 3 people in it? They took up positions on both sides of the garage and gave lawful commands to all 3 occupants. They were in full police uniform. 2 of the 3 occupants complied without issue and raised their hands. And it was Mr. Netterville's decision not to do so several different times and to start and stop the vehicle as the officers attempted to get them to comply with their lawful orders. As they were attempting to do that, Mr. Netterville decided to pull the van out of the garage, and in doing so, turned the wheel towards Officer O'Brien. We saw that on the video. And if you slow it down even more so as the shot is fired, immediately thereafter the wheel turns a little straighter and the van proceeds out because the van did not have to turn towards Officer O'Brien to exit the garage. There's plenty of room for the van to go straight and then turn to negotiate to turn down the alley if the individual merely wanted to escape. It was Officer O'Brien's statement. I believe you've got it up there. Lieutenant Aberly read that to you, that he was in fear for his life, that he was going to be run over. That was independently investigated by the North Dakota Bureau of Investigation, reviewed independently by the North Dakota Attorney General's office, and found to be lawful use of deadly force to protect his life. So what happens after the gunshot is you can see him stepping backwards as the van directs around and continues on.
So, excuse me, Chief Zimbowski, so you believe that your officers exhausted every possible option before using excessive force?
Officer O'Brien did. He had nowhere else to go. And so he's trying to back up out of a garage. He can't see behind him where he's at. He's trying to get away from the tire turned towards him. And so I know that some of you went through the FATS training, and it gives you some perspective in terms of how quickly that decision has to be made when you're faced with a potential life or death situation. It's the same thing in this particular instance.
Chief, I appreciate your answer.
Thank you.
Thank you for the answer, but it doesn't really answer my question. And I go back to the statement made, the joint statement, which is the force used prevented death or great bodily harm. And so I ask again, how did shooting Shane prevent anything?
It prevented the officer from being run over.
I have a question. The call came in as injured persons, suspectedly injured persons at the scene, right? Slumped over, they're injured. What point do we see or hear in the report where the officers actually figure out if there's anyone injured that needs assistance?
There was no opportunity to do that because of the actions of Mr. Netterville. First thing that they have to do is make sure that they're operating in a safe environment. With the observations and the bullet hole and the reactions, they want to get those folks out of the van to determine. They had no idea if there was someone else in the van injured, but they weren't provided the opportunity to fully investigate that because Mr. Netterville decided to drive out of the garage.
I'd like to take a minute to read the Fargo Police Department's policy on moving vehicles. It's policy number 300.4.1. And this is right out of the handbook. Shots fired at or from a moving vehicle involve additional considerations and risks and are rarely effective. When feasible, officers should take reasonable steps to move out of the path of an approaching vehicle instead of discharging their weapon at the vehicle or any of its occupants. An officer should only discharge a firearm at a moving vehicle or its occupants when the officer reasonably believes there are no other reasonable means to avert the imminent threat. Imminent, that's a meaningful word. Threat of the vehicle, or if deadly force other than the vehicle is directed at the officer or others. And so in reading that, I go back to last month's presentation by Deputy Chief Anderson. And as the video showed us, and as Deputy Chief Anderson explained, and these are verbatims, I jotted these down, they're verbatims from the presentation. Officer Thiedemann was never in front of the vehicle. Officer Poole was behind Thiedemann, so he was also off to the side, not in front of the vehicle. And then Deputy Chief Anderson explained further, Officer O'Brien, when moving in front of the vehicle, does not stop and stand in front of the vehicle at any point. He moves all the way across. And so this is where I'm really struggling, and I don't understand, because here we have 3 officers on scene, none of whom are in the exit path of the vehicle per the investigation. We have a non-compliant driver. We don't know why he wasn't compliant, but he was non-compliant, unarmed, and he's attempting to flee. And I guess I want to understand how a Fargo police officer shooting Shane Netterville, how can that not be a violation of that policy?
I'll try and explain it as best as I can to you, okay? The officers were trying to get out of the way. There was no opportunity for O'Brien to get out of the way in his position as Mr. Netterville turned the van in his direction, which he did not have to do to simply flee. Why he made that decision, none of us can answer. But having a tire of a vehicle pointed at you and then accelerated is an imminent threat. Imminent meaning immediately or likely to happen. And from that perspective, the officer has to make the decision to protect himself and use deadly force. And that's the best explanation I can give to you in terms of how that is within policy. They didn't stand in front of the vehicle. They didn't prevent it from leaving. They were on side of it when the vehicle turned towards Officer O'Brien, putting him in a position where he could not get out of the way.
I guess I have a couple challenges to the police department, and my first ask would be that you thoroughly analyze your policy 300.4.1 to determine if it's adequate, consider if it needs to be amended or added to in any way that might provide officers additional options and avoid tragedy. My other ask would be, I'd like to understand what kind of coaching and follow-up support is being offered to Officer O'Brien and others in the aftermath of this tragedy. And I'm asking that that be provided to the board.
Would you like me to respond to that, sir?
Sure.
Okay. And we have, our training and development unit has looked at both of these instances in order to evaluate, just as you said, for any potential additional training that might provide some different guidance to officers in similar situations. So that's already underway. In terms of the support for Officer O'Brien, he's had constant contact with our peer support team and our police psychologist, in which they can check in with at their own volition. But that is being reviewed. And then the policy is national best practice and up to date. And again, it takes into consideration every potential plausible thing that can happen, the circumstances of each of these instances. And no one's happy about the outcome of this. So, no one's happy at all that a life was lost. But our officers are placed in these positions many, many times every day of the week and successfully navigate through many of them because they're able to convince people to do something different than maybe what they were going to do. In this instance, again, that opportunity just wasn't there. And had we been able to, Mr. Netterville just not done that, just stopped, and they would have exited the car, this situation would have ended very differently. This is not it's not a situation where we have one individual in a house who has some type of an issue and is a danger only to themselves. This was a public safety concern reported to us by someone from the public. We do have a duty and obligation to investigate it. They did the best that they possibly could, and they tried to prevent something like this from happening.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that answer.
Thank you.
And this is the last thing I've had, but the other thing that this board is tasked with advising the department on is in regards to community concerns. And I've done a lot of listening since the last meeting. And in listening to members of our community, many now see a cloud over the police department. There's anger, there's outrage. Confidence and trust have been lost. The constructive dialogue we seek between the Fargo Police Department and community representatives has been damaged. We now have at least two city commissions, the Human Rights Commission and the Native American Commissions, who now view the Fargo Police Department not as a trusted and valued partner, but they view you with suspicion. And we can't ignore that. And I think it's the responsibility of this board to take some action. And this is where I might need some help from you, Nancy, but I think it's a prudent step in restoring the confidence and trust with the goal of full transparency, eliminating even the appearance of a possible conflict of interest in these investigations. I would ask then another set of eyes be put on this. And we're not investigative. And so I guess I would recommend that we reach out to the U.S. Attorney for North Dakota to look at this. I'm in agreement with the Human Rights Commission on that. And this is important, not necessarily to pursue another outcome, but to lift the cloud that hangs over you right now, to ensure fairness, to restore public confidence, and to make your department and this city better. And so that's what I have. And so I don't know, Nancy, if that's a recommendation or if I make a motion or how that works. But those are my thoughts this evening on Shane Netterville.
And I second that. I don't know if we can make a motion for the board members to vote on that issue.
It's not technically on the agenda, so I don't.
So, right, so it's
We don't
not
make a
on the
motion.
agenda for that particular topic. So I think that's something that could be considered further. But again, I would want you to consider what your role is to promote the oversight of the police department. You don't act independently. Your recommendations are to the city commission if that's something that you wish to do.
Does
But
that
of
sound good
course,
that we would
that
want to
is
make a
something
recommendation
separate from that.
We
for
could
the
do
city
that.
commission to reach out?
So can we make a recommendation to the city commission without having to make a motion and have it on the agenda?
It would be something that would generally be on the agenda for further discussion. I don't know if the other members have an opportunity to weigh in on that. It should have been added at the beginning of the agenda. You approved the agenda, and so you're adding items to the agenda, which I will say it was a problem with the HRC as well at that time. So I do think that proper protocol would be to add it to the agenda and have further discussion of it. In part because I wasn't aware that this motion was going to be made. I'd like to consider what that
Yeah.
recommendation means.
Do we need some more discussion?
I don't, I think it goes on the agenda for the next meeting.
I agree with you. I think you gotta follow protocol, because if you don't, you get in trouble.
Let me ask again, would it be appropriate to make a recommendation to the city commission that they reach out to the U.S. attorney? Would that be proper?
With it on the agenda? I mean, it still needs to be an agenda
So basically, we have to put
item
it on the agenda before.
for all of us to have a consensus, because now you're putting everybody on the
That's-
spot to make a decision without giving an opportunity
Or
to think it through.
do we need to discuss it more
I-
before we decide to put it on an agenda?
I would think so,
Maybe we should talk about that some more.
That would have been nice.
yeah.
Then we need to have the opportunity to talk about that as a group, right?
Is now a good time?
I say, why?
No.
So will we have to make a motion to amend this meeting so that we can discuss this?
I mean, we have an agenda currently set up, and that's the agenda that is to be followed in this meeting. If you want to add on something where the whole board is going to vote on something not on the agenda, that needs to be on the agenda. So I do think that needs to go on the agenda for the next meeting. Not something that we vote on in this instant without every member having the opportunity to think this through.
I'm sorry, excuse me, I know I'm out of order.
That's out of order.
Yes, I know, the Human Rights Commission asked
Okay.
everybody to put it
It-
on the agenda, and the agenda.
I'm gonna put a call to order. It's a call of order right now. I'm following what I'm supposed to be doing. So, I mean, are we gonna just put that on the agenda for the next meeting?
No, I think if you intend to make a recommendation and make a motion, that would be a motion that would be voted on, and it wasn't placed on your agenda. I haven't had an opportunity to consider that. As far as whether a public body of the city of Fargo would be making that recommendation for, as well.
Well, thank you for providing the guidance. I do find it confusing, as I think others do too, so I appreciate you educating me.
All right. So we've concluded this portion. I think the next part of our agenda was the officer-involved shooting of Mr. Martinez in Mapleton.
Good evening, Board. Thank you for this opportunity. I am Deputy Chief Anderson. I oversee the Professional Standards Division. This evening, I'm going to give you an overview. I realize Sheriff Johnner has already covered some of the information that I'm going to provide. So please keep that in mind. I will be limiting my comments to Fargo Police Department involvement. So in our commitment to keep this board informed, we are sharing an overview of this critical incident video to provide you with information about the officer-involved shooting on August 1st, 2022 in Mapleton, North Dakota by the members of the Fargo Police Department. We extend our condolences to the Martinez family and friends for their loss. We also recognize the trauma extends to the officers' family and friends, the department, and the community experiences when an officer-involved shooting occurs. Our department professional accountability unit has conducted an internal review of the officer's actions and determined no use of force policy violations occurred. Lieutenant Aberly will provide an additional information on this review after this presentation. On August 1st, 2022 at 10:34 a.m., dispatch received reports of gunshots possibly coming from 501 5th Street, Mapleton, North Dakota. Cass County deputies heard additional gunshots as they arrived on scene. A witness, identified as the neighbor, told dispatch he heard gunshots and saw the suspect, Andrew Martinez, on the back porch, and the witness overheard Martinez make suicidal comments. Dispatch also received information there was a person experiencing a mental health crisis near this address. This was a multi-jurisdiction response with involvement from the regional North Dakota law enforcement agencies, Sanford Ambulance, the Fargo and West Fargo Police Departments. This presentation, as I already said, will only address the actions and decisions of the Fargo police officers during this incident. Our involvement started when Sergeant Mosier from the Metro Street Crimes Unit, who's one of our sergeants, received a request for mutual aid from Cass County Sheriff's Office. Sheriff Jesse Johnner authorized the mutual aid request. 5 Fargo Police Department members of the Metro Street Crimes Unit responded to Mapleton to assist. The 5 Fargo police members of the Street Crimes Unit have been deputized by Sheriff Johnner and have law enforcement authority within Cass County. The Fargo Police Street Crimes members arrived on scene around 11:30 a.m. and met with Sheriff Johnner to get an update of the situation and to receive their assignments. As noted on the screen, the address 501 is the suspect's address, Mr. Martinez. You will see where the officers are positioned. Our officers are Investigator Cordy, Detective Jasper, Sergeant Mosier, and Detective Heller. The other officers are from other law enforcement agencies. As indicated on the map, Sergeant Mosier, Heller, or Detective Heller, Detective Jasper, and Investigator Cordy's final positions were within the inner perimeter just outside of 501 5th Street, which is the Martinez residence, and Detective Ziska was assigned to the outer perimeter. Detective Heller and Mosier and Sergeant Mosier were posted by 415 5th Street, approximately 314 feet to the east. Detective Jasper and Investigator Cordy were assigned to the Cass County armored vehicle, which was parked near the road, approximately 167 feet from the Martinez residence. They assumed their positions around noon and remained in position until the shooting at 2:18 p.m. The inner perimeter street crimes members were armed with their duty weapon and an AR-15, which is a .223 caliber round. Sergeant Mosier and Sheriff Johnner also positioned multiple officers armed with less lethal weapons in close proximity. So on the screen, Sergeant Castle was armed with a less lethal, as well as Deputy Wiedemann. And off to the west, which is not on there, we had a K-9 officer, Officer Miller, as well as, not confirmed, but information's been passed along that potentially one of North Dakota Highway Patrol was positioned with a less lethal to the west. During this incident, negotiators were in contact with Martinez trying to get him to surrender to law enforcement. At 1:08 p.m., Sergeant Mosier made contact with Martinez, who was standing on his back deck. Sergeant Mosier attempted to utilize crisis intervention techniques with Martinez, but Martinez did not acknowledge Sergeant Mosier. Martinez eventually went back inside his residence. As the incident progressed, Martinez told negotiators multiple times he was coming out with a firearm. Negotiators asked him not to do that, not to come outside with a firearm. At 2:18 p.m., an officer announced over the radio Martinez was at the front door with an quote-unquote an AR rifle. Martinez opened the screen door, pointed the rifle at the officers assigned at the armored vehicle on the road. Officers commanded Martinez twice to drop the rifle before firing. Sergeant Mosier, Detective Heller, Detective Jasper, and Investigator Cordy, all fearing for their safety and for the safety of the other officers on scene as reflected in their statements to the BCI, fired their rifles at Martinez in an effort to stop the threat, which was Martinez pointing the AR rifle at the armored vehicle and at the officers. Sergeant Mosier relayed over the radio that Martinez had an AR-15 and he believed that Martinez was down. I would like to highlight, and this is just for informational purposes only and put things in perspective, that a point target effective range for the AR-15, which is a .223 round, is approximately 1,800 feet, or about a third of a mile. So what does a point target effective range mean? It means that an average shooter can hit a human-sized target at 1,800 feet at least 50% of the time. At 2:41, officers enter the residence, and at 2:42 p.m., the officers render medical aid to Martinez. At 2:45 p.m., Sanford ambulance personnel are cleared to approach, and at 2:57 p.m., Mr. Martinez is pronounced deceased. It is determined through the BCI investigation that 3 .223 casings were recovered from Detective Jasper's position. 2 .223 casings were recovered from Investigator Cordy's position. 8 .223 casings were recovered from Sergeant Mosier and Detective Heller's position. In total, 13 casings were recovered from the various Fargo PD officer positions. This corresponds with the officer statements given to the BCI investigators. The BCI also recovered 9 9mm casings believed to have been fired by Mr. Martinez. The BCI located a 9mm handgun loaded with 1 round in the chamber and 12 rounds in the magazine in the master bedroom. Additionally, the BCI found an AR-15 rifle with a magazine inserted in the rifle on the chair where Mr. Martinez was located. This rifle did not have a round in the chamber nor any rounds in the magazine. However, this could not be known to the officers at the time. What was known to the officers was Martinez had already fired multiple rounds, which were heard by neighbors and responding deputies. 2, Mr. Martinez ignored Sergeant Mosier's attempt to communicate and end the incident. 3, Martinez told the negotiators he would come outside with a firearm. 4, Mr. Martinez presented a deadly threat to the officers when he pointed the AR rifle towards the officers. The officers did not have to wait until Mr. Martinez fired at them before attempting to neutralize the deadly threat. At this time, I will play the video extractions from our 4 FPD officers' body-worn cameras. The first part of the clip demonstrates Sergeant Mosier's attempt to communicate with Mr. Martinez. The clip is also partially slowed down and enhanced to show Mr. Martinez pointing the AR rifle at the officers. The second clip is in real time and is not enhanced. There are hours of body-worn camera video starting around 11:30 a.m. and ending shortly after 3 p.m. So in interest of time, we'll show approximately 4 minutes of body cam video. It's important to note, as I mentioned before, the body-worn camera only captures one perspective, which is the angle of the body-worn camera lens. It does not allow viewers to see what the officers are seeing, feeling, or how close an object is in the camera. It's critical to place the officers and the witness statements in proper context in conjunction with the video.
Can you put your hands up and come over to us on this fence? Stand by, we're trying to talk to him. Andrew, we don't want to hurt you, we just want to talk to you, right? Can you come over here and step over this fence? Can you see if he has anything in his hands, Johnner?
Right hand's clear. Can't see left.
We're not 100% sure. Andrew, can you hear me? Can you walk over to us, please?
Left hand's clear.
Left hand's clear.
Right hand's clear.
Andrew, can you walk to us? Andrew. Let's just hold for now. Can you put your hands up and walk towards us? Can you slide on the other side of Heller? That's people cover.
It's fine.
Andrew, we just want to talk to you, man. We just want to take you and get you looked at today. That's all, right? Would you be willing to do that? We're not here to hurt you. We don't want to hurt you. We want to get you some help.
Left hand is still clear.
Can we do that, Andrew? Would you step out in the backyard and just lay down for us and we'll come talk to you?
Pulling in his left hand.
What's that? I can't hear you with the air conditioner running, Andrew. Will you just step out in the yard and we'll come talk to you? What's that? Can we do that, Andrew?
John or to Castle, if you guys got eyes on him or not.
Can you just step down into the yard and we'll come talk to you? Come on, man. Don't go back inside. Stay out here and talk to me. All right, pull back, pull back. Mail just went back inside. He was trying to tell us something, but I can't understand what he's trying to say.
So the next series of videos is the four Fargo officers, Sergeant Mosier, Heller, Jasper, and Cordy. You see them up there. Perspectives from their body cameras. And Sergeant Mosier's body camera is actually the best perspective out of all four, given where and how the body-worn cameras are worn by the officers.
Front door. AR rifle.
AR rifle.
Drop it!
Shots fired.
All right, everybody hold. Command, he came out with an AR-15. I think I heard him go down on the inside, but we are going to hold what we have. Everybody hold. You good?
I'm good. Door's still open on the one side. Drone might have visual.
Good copy. Team.
So I pause here. Just the video will seem like it repeats itself, but the next series of videos is unenhanced and unedited. So you'll see it in real time what the officers experienced.
At the Humvee, I want you guys to do quick buddy checks. I do not know if he fired or not.
I'm good.
Do buddy checks.
Yep. Armor's all good. No doors.
Something.
Front door. AR
Front
rifle.
door. AR rifle.
Drop it! Drop it!
Shots fired.
All right, everybody hold. Command, he came out with an AR-15. I think I heard him go down on the inside, but we are going to hold what we have. Everybody hold. You good?
I'm good.
All right, just again to reiterate, when you look at Detective Heller's body camera, you'll see that's, I believe, Sergeant Castle. He is armed with a less lethal option. And then, obviously, if I go back to the initial map, you will see that Deputy Wiedemann was with, or actually by or behind Detective Jasper. He had a less lethal as well. But however, as I stated, less lethal weapon options are not intended to replace or to effectively deal with deadly force situations. This concludes my presentation. I am open to any comments or questions at this time from the board.
I did have something. I know the crisis intervention team had been talking with Moser, is that correct?
So we had, just to clarify, so the negotiations team, unit, which is made, it's a multi-jurisdictional team. They were on the phone with, at various times with Mr. Martinez. The video clip showing Sergeant Mosier trying to employ CIT techniques, critical incident techniques, so those are, I guess, two separate things.
Okay.
Using crisis intervention and the negotiators trying to talk to him and convince him to come out.
Right. And so and I think this was maybe, because I can't recall where I'm getting this information, so I apologize. But I think during the news conference, there was some like the family was in contact with Mr. Martinez, and as was negotiator or critical team, right? But the family, you know, I guess that's too many people talking and you don't know what the cross conversation is, right? And so they were trying to, from what I understood, to work with, have the police or the crisis team be specifically in contact with Martinez. Is that correct?
I can't speak to what Officer Johnner said, but from my experience is that you want to limit the amount of people that speak to an individual. Just kind of one individual builds that
Right.
rapport.
Yep.
We avoid conflicting or confusing information. There was an opportunity when Mr. Martinez came out on the back deck to engage him. What the perspective was is the blue house was the neighbor's house. It was not Mr. Martinez, so he was actually further past, and you don't see that on the body camera. But that was an opportunity to try to engage him in a conversation and dialogue,
Yeah.
hoping to get him to come out and give up.
Right. One thing I just was wondering, because I know this is, you know, probably much more complex of a situation, but so, you know, it's like, can we just have the, you know, the police or the crisis intervention team work with Martinez so there's not too much crossover, everyone's saying something different? And I know sometimes it's difficult, people don't want to maybe talk with the police for whatever reason, whether they're in a mental health crisis or not. But I was just wondering, like, is this something that is available? Like, is there, or do you guys ever utilize like a third party? Or, I mean, I know this can be difficult as well, but like if somebody were more willing to speak to a social worker who was maybe situated with the officer, you know, to where the officer could still hear it, but maybe the person would feel more like talking or negotiating.
I believe I know where you're going with that, and the answer is it depends. We do we've utilized case managers in the past. However, I think the key indicator here is that Mr. Martinez displayed the potential for deadly force by firing
Yes.
a firearm.
Yep.
And by putting a civilian into that mix, we create a liability. So if Mr. Martinez were to shoot, or if we had that person on scene, the crisis negotiator teams are highly trained and have dealt with this type of situation in the past. And so I think they were the best tool at that time.
Right. And is the crisis intervention team, is that something for this type of a crisis where someone is holed up somewhere, you know, like in their home or with or without family members present? Is,
I think I should clarify, there's really no crisis intervention
Okay.
team.
I
It's a
don't- I
crisis
don't mean to
intervention
misspeak. I'm sorry.
Yeah, technique. So a vast majority of our officers are trained in CIT. It's a de-escalation techniques, how to deal with people who are in crisis. And so much of the negotiators are trained in CIT as well. It's just not Fargo Police Department. There's many. In fact, it's a nationwide program. It's a tool to use to try to de-escalate a situation.
yeah. All right. So I guess ultimately as well, and I just want to clarify this, like, clearly he made it clear he wasn't coming out without his weapon, right? So,
Yeah, and like I said, I can't speak for what the negotiators were talking to him. Obviously, I can only speak up to what was relayed in the BCI report.
Yep.
It was articulated that, and I believe Sheriff Johnner had quote unquote said that negotiations were up and down. I believe he said that at his press conference. So there were many times when Mr. Martinez said that he was going to come out with a weapon, and he was urged not to do that.
right. So I guess, right, and he made the choice to, for whatever reason, right? He was
Correct. He made the
in
choice to.
crisis, right. All right. That's what I got.
I've got one quick question. So in a joint operation like this, where you've got multiple different jurisdictions, after this critical event, the Fargo Police Department conducts an internal review of the incident. Is there a joint review as well? So do you see the sheriff's office internal review or West Fargo Police? Does that go together because this operation involved multiple different organizations?
The internal review is a policy review conducted by, I guess, our professional accountability unit, only of our officers and our officers' actions in relation to our policy. So Sheriff Johnner would have conducted a policy review of his personnel, which would not have been over our personnel in West Fargo and vice versa.
Okay, so the FPD review is just for the FPD involvement?
Correct.
And whether or not policy was followed, okay.
Right, and Lieutenant Aberly is ready to give those findings.
Copy, thank you.
I have a quick question. Just in terms of the policies, when a police officer encounters someone with a firearm, what are their choices? Obviously, they have to think on the fly in terms of making certain decisions. So what are the policies and that in a few words which authorize the use of lethal force with a firearm?
I believe Chief Zabolski had already answered that question previously during the Netterville review. It's not simple. It's complex. It's a matter of making a decision, a split-second decision. There's a lot of training that goes along with it. So I can't simply answer it, but I think Chief Zabolski did well in answering that question.
And excuse me, if you're looking for the specific policy, sir, it's policy 300, use of force. That's on our website and available for public review.
And how long have that policy been existing?
Probably predated my start, but we have made some adjustments to it in the last 2 years as well to make sure that we've stayed current. One of the things about our policy system is that it's reviewed from a legal perspective by the organization that runs its Lexipol policies, so that we have not only best practice, but also legal review, and then any changes that may be made to our state law that would affect police policy. So that's a regular process that occurs.
You know, one thing that I see is that the city of Fargo is continuously evolving. Therefore, I believe is that we need to evolve with it. And that means, in fact, if we need to look at policies and procedures, communication and de-escalation, or even if, in fact, if we need to find a way to improve on how these policies are being implemented. Because one thing that I do know in the 1 year that I've been here is that I'm not liking what I'm seeing. I do know that. And with that being said, David made an excellent point in regards to other eyes, looking at what is being implemented. And I think, in fact, is that would be advantageous, is to do that. Because I made a recommendation during the HRC meeting is to push this back to the Police Oversight Review Board. And in my assessment, that should have been on the agenda. So with that being said, I think we need to reevaluate on what we're doing and how we're doing it so that we can get it right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I might ask that we put another review of this on the agenda for next time, because it's kind of like the Netterville conclusions too, where it's just a lot of stuff in a short period of time. So that I don't have questions now doesn't mean that I won't have them when I look at it again, because it's just a lot for me to digest, so.
And if I could add to that, and I apologize for not getting those documents to you, that's totally my fault, but then I will make sure that you have those ahead of time. And we have a meeting that's just another 2 weeks away because of this one being moved.
Okay.
You got 2 weeks. All right.
I'm sorry. Next time.
Okay, I think
All right,
that's,
thank
I
you.
think that's good, thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is a November date for our 6-month review.
In preparation with the fact that this is our 6th meeting, and a lot of information and a lot of things have come at you as a board, I recognize that there are a multitude of questions and concerns. And so we were going to invite you to like a coffee brown bag question and answer location where we would have the director of our PAU, the director of our training, Nancy, and the director of our communications. And so some of these questions and concerns that you're just unsure of how the logistics and practice and works in the real sense, we can just really process that and answer those questions and figure out how we move forward, being that we're such a new board. And so we will be sending out some dates and times. We are hoping that informal brown bag coffee will be able to occur prior to our next meeting in 2 weeks. And so there's a lot of, that's a time crunch for you. And so if you already know of dates and times that are for sure not available to you, it is likely we'll send out 4 or 5 dates. We're hoping for like a 5 o'clock time frame. 4 or 5 o'clock timeframe. And so that will be coming out in an email. And then obviously, due to the quorum complexities, all of that will be released to the public as well and for the notice.
And were you, what was the amount of time that you were going to allot for the meeting? Would that be a 1-hour meeting or a 2-hour meeting or an open-ended meeting or?
I didn't anticipate
Okay.
it being open-ended.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
I would say 60 to 90 minutes,
Okay.
and we could then start with some of the priority questions. I just wanted to have the people that have those answers for you. So if you have a question about communicating with the public and communicating with each other, then we have both Nancy and Greg, our Director of Communications for the city, present. If you have questions about how do you access and interpret policy, we're going to have our lieutenant from the training division present. If you have questions about internal evaluations and the board, we're going to have, somebody from our PAU team. Just nothing specific to a specific incident such as this, but more of like, how do you digest all of the purposes and presentations, and how do you communicate, and how do you process, and how do you, those kind of other things is what we are hoping for, 60, 90 minutes.
Yeah, I was just asking because I didn't really feel that 60 minutes was going to be enough.
I mean, we're not saying that we can't
Yeah,
continue these
right.
conversations. This is part of that ongoing training. This is where we would get together again and kind of reflect really more so of the last 6 months. And we recognize you've been drinking from the fire hose. It's just a lot to digest, and there's a lot of insurity and moving forward. And so without any specific conversations about a particular incident, but general practice procedure questions so that you don't necessarily have to be unsure on how to move and process in an actual meeting. We want to work through some of those logistics in a future training, but more of an informal question in brown bag. So it can be 90 minutes, it can be, but it's not something that we couldn't continue to do regularly, just like we had you invited to, our training for the FATS program, and we will invite you to continual training. We will continue to evaluate and meet your needs so that you feel comfortable with your position and how to run the meeting and those kinds of logistics as well.
Madam Chair, can I?
So I think we can have that conversation in the invite, because I think if people can't stay. We don't want to make it too open-ended where we're
Right.
all working till 9 or 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, no.
We don't, so.
I just wanted to ask about the communication, if we could get some education on the communication between boards as well. I think that after watching some of that with the human rights and with the Native American Commission, and just not knowing that they were intending on bringing things to us, but not really knowing how that works exactly. I know that there was a meeting with the chair and with the police. I think just having some education
Sure.
with regard to that.
I
or
know
maybe-
that the directors of all three, the city department heads of all three of the boards and their staff are hoping to get together to discuss how that collaborative communication occurs. Because the complexity is all three boards are recommending boards to the city commission only.
Right.
And so the Human Relations Commission does not dictate and put items onto your agenda and vice versa, and the Native American Commission does not dictate and put items onto your agenda. You, as board members and the executive committee, communicate with the chief for those types of complexities. And so all of that processing, but how do you still, recognizing that all of you want to communicate in the best interests of the community and the interests, where that overlapping collaborations can occur appropriately, legally, and within the bounds of Robert's rules and those things, and staying in within ordinance, are all of those logistics that will occur in that conversation amongst the chair, the heads of, and then that information, once that meeting occurs, will be presented back to those individual boards by that department head is the goal.
Right. All right, any other business?
Can I just comment one real quick before you adjourn? I just wanted to, again, I think recognize what Sergeant Jacobson has said. And this board in its infancy has had a lot come in front of it in a very short amount of time. We all greatly appreciate your willingness and commitment to take this responsibility on and the ability to dialogue with you as well as our community members. We understand that there are some that do have concerns. We're all interested in the same goal in terms of preserving life. So we're open to those conversations. And we appreciate the continued opportunity for that type of respectful dialogue so that we can work through those issues. So I just wanted to thank you as well as the folks that are here today with some of their concerns. We're committed to that same goal. So thank you very much for your patience on this.
All right. I don't hear any other business to come up. So this meeting of the Police Advisory and Oversight Board stands adjourned. Our next meeting is scheduled in 2 weeks, November 10th at 5 p.m. Week delay.